Good day everyone, welcome back to my channel. Now right in front of you is all the components I've been waiting for a long time, and in my previous video, right, I've actually highlighted on a special case, which is actually a budget case known as the Montech Air 100 series. If you guys are interested to know how this case functions and what are the features, you can actually click on the top right hand corner. I'll just leave the URL over there. Now in this video, I will go through the step-by-step of my style on how I actually built the PC components into the case itself. Please be aware that this is going to be a very lengthy video where I share all my experiences and knowledge to you guys. Hope that by the end of the video you have picked up some tips and tricks. Before you start building anything or touching any PC components, right, it's best to actually discharge yourself. Here in Singapore we do not have that, but if you're staying in North America, South America, or in some Europe countries, make sure you ground yourself. In order to discharge electricity that is actually carried in your body itself, right, touch the PC case itself or any metal surface, so you will discharge all the current. Once you have actually done that, right, then proceed on with touching the components. And another tip, do not work with PC components on a carpet floor. Make sure that you place it on a hard wooden surface, or even better with a ESD anti-static mat. This build will be very basic. I'll start off with the processor. This is actually making use of the Ryzen 5 5600G. This you can actually operate without a discrete graphic card, meaning you say it has a built-in APU, or should I say a graphic card within the processor itself. Next will be the RAMs. I'm using the Ballistic 32 gig kit. The clock speed is actually running on 3200. Now I'm still waiting for my M.2s, so temporarily I'll be using this Intel M.2, which is about 250 gig of space. That will do. And the motherboard itself. The motherboard I'm using is a MATX form factor. This is coming from ASRock Steel Legend. It's a B550M motherboard. Before you place the processor on the CPU socket itself, right, take a look at the CPU socket. Let me just zoom in. You will notice that on the CPU socket itself, right, there is this small triangle over here. Take note of this small triangle, because this triangle will tell you how to sit your processor onto the socket itself. As the processor itself, right, as you can see on the left lower corner, there is this golden triangle, small golden triangle. This is where it matches the triangle on your socket. So place it where you are comfortable. And I'm going to place it at my lower right hand corner so that I know that that is where I should sit the processor triangle to. To remove the processor itself, right, make sure that you are not lifting up, and to remove the cover, make sure that it's actually level on the table itself. So in the event if you drop the processor, right, it will not dent the pins. If you leave it too high, chances of the pin being dented is very high if it happens that you drop the processor itself. Next, open up the cover. Make sure you hold the package properly. Open it up. At the side of the processor, in this cover itself, right, there are two holes. It's for you to actually place your fingers and to pinch the processor itself. So when you have a firm grip on the processor, right, turn it over, grab the processor. So once you have pinched it, right, you can place it to the socket. Unlock the socket lever. Now the triangle is over here, and I know the triangle is over here in the socket itself. So just gently sit it. When it's seated, right, it will gently glide into position. You don't have to use any force. So using your finger, right, if you to actually like gently move at the top, it will not wiggle. So once you know that it's confirmed seated at the correct position, lock. Next we'll be inserting the RAM kit. I'm actually having a dual channel RAM kit. Do take note on your motherboard menu on how to do the placement for dual RAM kits. And I do know that this motherboard itself, right, if I were to show you, now let me just zoom in. On the motherboard itself, it will state A1, A2, B1, B2, which is I'm going to slot on A2 and B2. This is actually what is instructed on my motherboard manual, so do check your motherboard manual for it. On the RAMs itself, right, do take note that there is this grooving over here, the slot. Make sure it matches. If not, right, you will not be able to sit into the RAM slot. Let me just show you closer. If I were to do it incorrectly, right, like this, if you can see that the grooving over here, it doesn't match the RAM slot, so you can't sit your RAMs into the slot. So what you need to do is to turn over and make sure it matches. And when you are slotting your RAMs, right, make sure you glide through this guiding slot, which is on both sides. So let me just show you. I know that I'm actually going to fit into A2 and B2. So I'll start off with A2. Go through the slide, as in like the two ends here. There is a guiding slot. Slide through it. Once you got a firm slide or seated where it touches the groove itself, right, which is actually here. So you can actually push on both ends firmly, and it will sit when you hear the click. Done. Next will be on this slot here. Same thing. Do not force it. Make sure you see, eyeball it, and make sure that the groove is sitting correctly. So just push it in. Done. Next will be the insertion of the M.2. In some motherboards, they have this M.2 armor plating. You will need to actually remove it. Before you remove that, right, make sure you get the correct screw head. This is actually a Phillips screw head and matches the screws on the armor plating itself. If you do actually use something which is bigger or smaller, and when you unscrew it, right, it might damage the thread and you might not be able to actually remove the cover. So do be careful on this. Now I'm just going to remove the screws. And to remove off the armor, make sure you do not lose the screws. In fact, it's best that you have something magnetic to actually retain these screws. Now you can gently remove the armor plate. For some reason, right, the chipset over here is actually gluing very tightly on the armor plate, so I will have to actually slowly lift it up. Okay, this is actually lift up. Done. Now insert the M.2. Some M.2 have this screw that where you can actually screw on it. Do check on your motherboard package. So for this, right, I know that it does not have, so I'll just slot it in. Before you place back the armor plating, for all new motherboards, right, there is this thermal pad for your M.2. Make sure that you remove off the protective sticker on it before you place it back. And I will align the armor plate back. You will not go wrong if you gently do it. Okay, it's in place. Once it's in place, check on the sitting, then tighten the screws, and it's done. I do have another video whereby I always do this before I fit the whole board into it. That is actually to test the board outside the case, and I'll leave the URL at the top right hand corner where you can actually take a look. That will show you how to actually test the motherboard, the RAMs, and make sure it's actually functioning. And also I have another video, part 2, whereby I have actually prepared the application on the M.2 itself. So do check it out. I'll leave it at the top right hand corner. Next is to test out all the newly purchased equipment, or should I say PC parts, like the power supply, the fan, the fans on the radiator, the aRGB effects, the pump itself. And to test the PSU itself, right, I'm making use of this meter here. It's shown on the other video. You can actually have a look. Why am I doing this test is because that in the event if any of this PC components is actually faulty, right, I can just change it straight. rather than I were to fix everything into the case, and when I turn it on there's some problem, I have to dismantle it. That is going to cost time. So first thing I'll do, right, is to actually check on the power supply itself, and if it works, then I'll continue on to test, as mentioned, the fans and the pump itself. I'll show you on how I test on the AIO. Just turn this on. As you can see, I have a small gadget over here whereby I can actually connect the pump and the fan. When you're testing the pump, right, make sure you place the hose below, then plug your pump, or should I say the fan header itself. And this is actually running. And I can feel the pump is actually circulating. And I can hear the noise. The air bubbles is actually trying to slowly dissipate to the top of the radiator itself. So this works. Next, I will test the fan. So I'm just going to stop the pump over here. Bring it down. I'll just connect the fan header to this device here. It works. So it's functioning. I've also purchased this device here. This is actually to test aRGBs. Most of the time when I want to actually inquire RGBs or aRGBs, right, I like to use remote physical control rather than to actually install the application on the system itself and to control through that. I feel that there are too much system resource using, and also some of the applications have bloatwares. So having to say this, right, I will connect this end to the SATA. Then over at this end, right, there is a standard 3-pin aRGB. I'll just connect to the pump aRGB, whereby the fan aRGB will react. Then of course, since this is newly purchased, right, this aRGB controller itself is newly purchased, I will cycle to see if it works. It works. Done. And with this, right, the device on the aRGB and this gadget here, right, I'll test the rest of the fan. And once it's okay, everything is working properly. Oh, one thing good is that when you do this test, right, when you're testing the pump itself, you can actually check if there's any leakage on the hose itself, especially the ends and the joints, and make sure that the pump is actually running. If not, right, you can actually get it changed instead of having this mounted on the case and you have to dismantle it and to troubleshoot it. Then, as mentioned, next I will test this fans out. Now I'm going to skip the test on the fans itself because it's the same procedure using this gadget and the aRGB controller. Next, on the motherboard itself, right, I will make sure that I will mount this bracket for my AIO. Now the instruction in fact is from Arctic website itself, so it will tell you how to actually mount and the screw points, whereby which is actually for AM4 and the Ryzen 5000 or the 3000. So I'll remove them, as I've actually done this before many times. So I will mount the brackets. Now once you have actually done mounting, right, kindly take a picture of the header itself over here. So I'm just going to show you. I've actually taken down the picture. Now reason being, right, when you mount this on the case itself, there are headers for you to plug on the front panel, which is actually the power switch, reset switch, the power LEDs, and the hard disk LED. So when you take a picture itself, right, see, you will get to actually see, you will actually get to see the pinouts. So as your smart camera, or should I say your phone itself, right, you can zoom and it will tell you things like which is actually positive, and this is actually for power LED, this is for this LED, this is for power switch, and this is for reset switch, so that you know that this pinout over here, right, as over here, you know which to connect, so it will be easier this way. As you can see here, I've actually mounted the mounting brackets for the AIO itself, so I'm going to put this one side. I've actually removed off the RAMs for later reason, which I'm going to explain later. Let me just put this one side. Coming to the AIO itself, right, I will also need to mount these brackets here to the pump itself. So I'm going to do that now. The mounting brackets are done on the pump itself. As you can see that I've actually not taken out this label here. Now it's good to actually check if it sits correctly. So normally what I'll do is actually I will mount this without thermal paste onto the motherboard itself. You don't have to screw it real tight, just secure it in position will do. I'll just temporarily put 2 screws. Now when you're doing this, right, it is to check the positioning of the pump block to your processor IHS. Okay, let me just lift this up. Now I'm going to zoom in. Now as you can see over here, right, it does show you where the block sits on the motherboard itself, so you know that, oh, this is okay. Then of course you can see the angle over here. Once you have checked the location is correctly positioned, you can actually remove the pump block itself. Now after you have removed the pump block itself, right, don't forget to place back the RAMs. Just gonna lift this one side. As mentioned, now normally do a slight cleanup and on the RAMs itself before I place it back, because all your fingerprints and such, all the oil itself, so it's good to actually give it a clean. Then once this is done, right, your motherboard is ready to actually place into the case. Same with the AIO. Next is actually to prepare the case itself to prevent scratches. First is actually the tempered glass. Take out the front bezel. Remove this. Now, reason to remove all this, right, while you're preparing it and you're moving the case itself, you will not scratch the case itself. So, including the side panel on the right. Now, once you have actually done that, right, lie your case flat on the table itself. Normally what I'll do is actually to use a paper towel and to clean the motherboard area. Sometimes you never know that there might be metal pieces, you know, sticking out from the motherboard standoffs and such. You might be asking, why am I cleaning the surface on the motherboard area? Now, as mentioned to you, there might be some chip off, or should I say some deburr metal pieces that is actually located at the standoff area itself. So if you were to mount the board without cleaning it, right, and it happens that all this so-called residue that are conductive, it might just short the back of some of the pinouts on the motherboard itself. So just to play safe, I'll just do a clean. So Give a good clean, and you're ready to actually mount the motherboard and the rest of the parts into this case. Now it's time to actually place the motherboard into the case itself. But before you do so, right, on the motherboard itself, there are some stickers over here, or should I say protective stickers. You can just remove them off. And once you have actually done that, as you notice on the motherboard itself, right, there are screw holes. So you need to align with the motherboard standoffs. These are the standoffs. So let me just zoom in. See? And when you're aligning with the standoff itself, right, especially the back plate itself, make sure you align the back plate over here, the cutoff. So I'll just place it in. Now this is actually in position. Let me just zoom in for you. See, as you can see, it's a line. Then I will screw the standoffs, or should I say I screw the screws to hold the motherboard on the case itself. Now I won't be screwing all the standoff because I need to check the back plate. So if any adjustment needed, right, I will need to adjust it. So this is temporary. So when you flip the motherboard itself, right, I mean the back itself, right, as you can see, it's aligned. So once this is done, you can proceed to continue fastening the motherboard with the rest of the standoffs. The motherboard is actually in place. Then I will actually do some light cleaning on the board itself. Reason to clean, right, because you have actually touched the board and all your finger oil and such will be actually on the motherboard itself. The next step will be placing the 3.0 header, the USB 2 header, the front header, and the audio cables. So remember the position as in like where they are, and look at the slots that is actually available. So once you have actually done this, right, flip your case over. These are the headers that I'm talking about. So you have your USB header, your audio header, your front header where your switch, power switch, the reset switch, the LED that lights up the power, and the HDD activity. And this is actually the 3.0 header. So I will be placing first the audio cable, which is this, to the last slot. Just leave it as it is. Then the USB, I know it's actually at the center, and all this header, right, is right in front. So tuck them in nicely. Just to show you, see, all these slots, which is cater for you to slot all those cables in. Then for the USB 3, right, I will put it here. Once I've actually done this, I will flip over. Then I'll start to work connecting the cables. I'll start off with the easiest connector, which is actually the 3.0 USB connector. Now you're supposed to slot this cable onto this slot here. Let me just zoom in. Now on the connector itself, right, if you notice there's a groove over here, it's supposed to actually flush with this slot over here. So what I'll do is actually I'll position it so this groove to this slot. So I just place it in. Once it's aligned, I'll push it down to connect to the slot, and this is done. Now this is done with the 3.0 connector is in place. The next thing, this is actually a very daunting task whereby you will need to actually connect the power switch, the reset switch, and the hard disk LED activity and the power LEDs. So let me just zoom in. Now I'm just going to tilt this angle over here so that you can see. Now having to say so, right, earlier on I've actually mentioned to take a picture of the front header, and I'll explain all these connectors over here. Now I'll start off with the first row. This is actually the first row, this is actually the second row. The first row consists of the hard disk LED, which is actually from the rear, and from the front, in fact, is the reset switch. Now, the first pin will be ground, the second will be positive, and the third pin will be ground. Then followed by ground, and followed by the positive. So this two last pin, right, is in fact for the hard disk activity, the LEDs, and the front three, right, in fact, you can either connect the first two or the second and third, but I will choose the first and second, which is actually the ground and followed by the positive. Now looking on the connector itself, right, all these are actually labeled, so I will choose the reset switch. Now how do I know which is positive and which is negative? Flip over the connector itself. As you can see here, right, there's one triangle over here. This tells me that this is actually the positive cable. Without the triangle, it's actually negative. So I know that the first pin is actually ground, the second is positive. So I'll place the positive to the positive, ground to the ground. So I hope that you can actually see. I'm just going to do it this way. So knowing the orientation itself, right, I'll place the switch this way. So make sure you see it properly. It's hard to see, so you will need to actually see properly that it sits to the correct pin. So right now I know that it's seated to the correct pin, the ground and the positive. So I'll just push it in. This is in place. Next will be the hard disk connector. This is definitely a very delicate operation. So again, when I flip over, right, as I mentioned to you, that the triangle is the positive and the without triangle is the negative, which is ground. So I know that it should be placed this way. Okay. So knowing that the last pin of the row is in fact positive, and this is the fourth pin, right, is actually ground, I will place the pin this way. This is done. So positive and ground. I'll just push it in. Now on the top row itself, this is actually where the power switch and the LEDs are. For the power switch, for the first pin here, right, the first pin is actually empty, then followed by the second pin. The second pin is the power switch negative, or should I say ground. Then on the next pin here, this is actually the positive. So again, with the pin, I will pick the power switch, which is this. Again, I look at the indication on the triangles itself. Now, just to show you, this is actually the power switch. So I flip over, taking note that the triangle, so I know that it's actually facing that side. So I would to place it this way, where the first pin is actually ground, then followed by the positive switch. So I just plug it in. Now apply same to the LEDs itself. This is the only header that shows with the labeling as positive and negative. So this is quite easy. So I just connect as accordingly. Now the third pin, in fact, is actually negative or ground, and the last pin is the positive. So there you have it, all connected. So this is actually how you connect all the front headers for you to operate, as in like power on and to reset your system. The front panel is actually done, so the next thing to do, in fact, is to do the USB connector. Now let me just zoom in again. As you can see that there are two USB connector over here. I'll just choose the first one. Now if you notice, right, at the bottom row there is one blank pin here. So on the connection itself, right, there is this blockage. This is meant for the connector to actually match with the empty slot, or should I say empty pin. So this is actually quite straightforward, whereby you don't have to actually use too much force. Just align it. It can only go in one way. So there you have it. Now the next thing will be the audio cable, and to zoom in, for the audio cable itself, right, it works almost the same as the USB, whereby you see here there is a blockage on the second pin. So when you look at the end here, right, I'm not too sure if you can see. Let me just push over. So at the top here, as you can see at the end, this is also an empty pin. So again, I will just align it and to feed it in. There's only one direction to this, so you don't have to use much force. You will just sit in according to the pins, and when you plug it in, right, that's it. There you have it, it's plugged. Flipping to the other side of the case itself. Now these are the cables which I've actually done, the audio, the USB 2, the USB 3 and the front header. Now these are the cable mesh which I'm going to tackle it later. Next I will actually insert the power supply. Now this is actually a SFX power supply. You might be wondering, why am I using this? Now this is actually my spare power supply, and before I insert the power supply itself, right, I've actually removed off the hard disk cage because I have no use of it. Then grab those cables that you need. Since this is actually a modular power supply, I'll just move this one side first. Now on the power supply itself, right, grab the cables that you need. I will need the SATA cable for my aRGB controller, then the motherboard 24 pin, and the EPS connector to the motherboard. So having to say so, right, I'll just plug this in first. Now you will not go wrong with the plug-in because it can only go in one direction. So this is plugged. For the PSU, I will use here. Now when you plug the connectors, right, there are, take note on the indication. It says that CM PSU, this is actually to your PSU. CPU means to your EPS connector on your CPU itself. So there are labelings over here, so I'll just plug it in. Then for the SATA, once you're done, right, grab hold of your power supply. Now this will be facing below because there is a mesh over here that sucks in fresh air and to blow out hot air. So I'll slot this in. Make sure there are no cable blocking. Then I'll screw this power supply on the case itself. The power supply is nicely tucked in. It's actually fastened, done properly. Now, if you are using an SFX power supply, right, in fact, I should be using an ATX, but it's just happened that this is my spare, so I'm using it and I'm prepared for it. Now, why do I say this is because these cables on the SFX itself, right, will not be long enough to reach your motherboard. See, it doesn't go through. So in such event, right, you can make use of extension, which I have prepared. Now, using the extension cable, right, you need to be careful also. There are ratings on the extension cable. For me, I would prefer to use 16 AWG as compared to 18 AWG. Reason being, right, 16 though is thicker, but they are more durable. Just to show you an illustration, this was my past mistake. I was using AWG 18, and this is actually what happened. So this happened to be my RTX 3080. I was using this with the GTX 1070 Ti, not a problem. But due to the fact that modern graphic cards, right, or modern PC components, right, they draw power a lot. So make sure that you know the grading of your extension cable. Try as best as possible, make use of AWG 16, which are this. Now I'm just going to show you how I'm going to plug the EPS to the motherboard and the 24 pin to the motherboard itself. For easy cable management on these cables itself, right, normally I will not plug this to the PSU cables yet. I will just flip the case. Starting off with the EPS socket on the motherboard, let me just zoom in. Now as you can see, this is actually the extension cable. On the extension cable itself, right, there's a hook over here. And on the socket on the motherboard, there is a hook over here. Not so sure if you can see. See, there's a hook over here. So all you need to do is just to match this and to plug it in. There are no other directions. It's plug and play. It's pretty straightforward. And when you're engaged with the alignment, plug it in, you'll hear a click. Then you can actually fold this cable into the hole. But before I do so, right, I'll do the 24 pin. Same thing, there's a hook over here, and the hook is actually here. So all you need is just to hook, or should I say align it to the socket, push it down. There's a click. And I'll fold this to this hole. A pro tip before you plug this end to the hole itself, right? As you can see, if I were to bend and plug, see, all this will be very messy. What you can do is actually use the cable comb to comb them properly first to the desired length. Then you can actually do the bend. So when you do the bend itself, right, it will be neater. So take note on this. Do the same to your EPS cables too. After you have actually routed the EPS cable to the back and the 24 pin cable to the back, I mean the extension cable, it's time to actually do all the cable ties, or should I say cable management. Reason I do it right now is because that when you have a tidy environment, right, later on with your fans and such, your AIO, it will be so much easier. So I'll just continue to do a cable tie. There's no right and wrong. It's all up to personal perception, and make use of all this that is actually catered in the case itself. As you can see, there are areas where you can actually hold the cable tie, as you can see here. So I'll proceed on with the cable tie itself. Everything is actually managed properly. All the cables are intact and they won't go anywhere. It's neat and tidy. Now often you see me clean the parts that I've touched, take a look at this. These are the portion that I've actually touched, so normally I'll clean them. Now, why do I actually clean them is because if you don't clean them right, at times if all this oil were to actually sit there for a very long time, let me just show you. See, this is actually what's going to happen. You see my prints all over here, so it will stay there if you don't clean it. That's the reason why I've actually cleaning it. Now, not only this, I will clean the edges. Now, once it's done right, when I flip over, you'll see that this is how neat it is. So when you actually pot in your AIO and your fans right, it will be easier. Now, there are some reviewers out there who actually did the opposite, which is actually to plug the power supply, then plug the motherboard itself, then plug the AIO, then they plug the power supply and to feeder with all the contact points. Reason I do it this way is because if I don't do the EPS cable first, there will be a problem if I were to mount the AIO first before I do this. So that's the reason why I've actually done the cabling properly, the measurement properly first before I place the AIO. So right now I don't have to worry about this cable here. So I only need to worry about the fan headers, which is actually the CPU and the pump itself. There is also another pointer whereby reviewers or PC builders on YouTube itself, right, they often place the case upright and to pot all the parts, or should say to feed in the part itself. Well, that is actually for show, but in real life, right, why do we need to actually go against the gravity? This is actually what I feel. So leave your case lying flat and you place the parts, it will be much more easier. And also a second reason is that if let's say you're actually fitting your GPU, for example, if you were to put your case upright and you were to slot right, what if you were to slip and drop your graphic card? You might be dropping your graphic card on the table itself, but what if it drops on the table and fell off from the table to the ground? You will damage all your parts. So this is something which I would to advise most of the people. Do not do mounting with your case upright. Do it laying flat. So let the gravity do all the job. Alright, I'm just going to continue to actually mount the AIO itself. I've already fitted the liquid cooler, or should I say the radiator in front. No, I was backfired. I was trying to actually mount this radiator at the top, but somehow it did not fit. Reason being, right, based on the fact that there's this heatsink over here that blocks the radiator, so I got no choice but to actually place it in front. But it's still okay. Now, having to say this, right, as you see earlier that when I did the mounting on the AIO itself, I've actually placed some cloth above the motherboard. Reason being, right, I was placing this on top of it, so just to prevent scratches. Now, the next step will be actually mounting the pump block onto the processor itself. Before you apply the pump on the, or should I say the block onto the processor itself, right, you will need to remove this off. Now, some of them just remove and they will just do it straight, but I would prefer to actually do a clean on the surface of the block itself. So what I normally do is actually to prepare some alcohol, then with some paper towel, and clean on the surface itself. Reason being, right, Now, when you remove off the protective tape, there might be residue resited on the surface itself, so it's best to actually clean it. Then once you have actually done this right, you can place this one side. Then I will clean the processor IHS. Same thing. Give a few drops of alcohol and do a wipe. Then clean up the surface. Once this is done, it's time to actually apply thermal paste, which I'm going to use the MX4. Now, the way that I do it is actually across, and for Intel, right, normally I'll do a grain. So for AMD itself, I do know that the die itself, right, it consists of two parts. So I will do across. There we have it, in fact, across. So what's next will be the pump block itself. Now, when I mount this in, right, I will not squash it. I will hold on it because there are 4 catch over here. So I'll just align it first. As mentioned, I'm not going to push it down. Next, I will use the retention screws. Fill up the 4 corners. See, I'm still holding on to the pump block. I didn't let it down. Once you have actually secured the 4 points, right, then use equal pressure on both sides. Push this down, wiggle a bit. Then, still holding onto the block, I'll do the tightening, hand tightening, slowly, diagonally. Until I feel there's a slight resistance, I'll stop. I'll continue with the other 2 sides. I feel the tension. So just hand tight. You don't really actually have to use a screwdriver to screw it so tight, because you need to have the paste in between the copper plate and the processor itself. So just hand tight gently will do, which right now I'm going to do it. See, even pressure. That's it, done. Then I will be plugging in the CPU, pump, and the fan. Now I will be plugging the fan header to CPU2/pump. Reason being, it's actually running 2A, or should I say 2 ampere, stronger current. Then on the top fans itself, right, once I mount the top fans, I will place it at CPU 1, which run on 1A. The last 2 steps of the build is to in fact insert, or should I say install the case fan. At the top there will be 2, and at the rear there will be 1, and also to install the aRGB controller. Now before I do all this, right, I will do a primary check whether if the system is booting up or not. So before you boot up, right, make sure you check the EPS connection, the 24 pin, and make sure that this is actually mounted properly, everything is in place. Then I will start up the PC itself. Then when you start up, right, at this screen over here, to see if it boots, it boots. So I go into the UEFI, see, it works. So on the UEFI itself, right, I'll see that, make sure everything is correct. This is actually the 5600G, which is correct. Then the RAMs, they are seated properly. And also to check on the M.2s. So, yep, this is correct. And not forgetting, I will check on the hardware monitor. Now, as mentioned to you, right, this board do not require to plug on the CPU fan 1. And you will be able to boot even if you connect to the CPU 2 fan or the chassis 1, chassis 2, etc, etc. But some boards, right, you will require to plug the CPU fan just for safety precaution. So it happens that this fan here, right, does not need to plug to CPU 1. As you can see, CPU 2 over here, I've actually plugged the pump and the fans, so it's working. And how do I check it? When you scroll up, right, you'll see that, see, this is the CPU 2, which is actually running. So with this said, right, I will boot to my Windows, which I've actually pre-installed on the M.2. So this is going to test the pre-installation that before that I've actually done all the installation. So make sure that it works properly. So when I do the last two parts where to install the fans, case fans and the aRGB, right, I can straight away work with the PC. See, right now I'm able to actually load into Windows 11, no problem. So it's working fine. Just to check everything is doing okay, I'll just go to the task manager. See, it's operating, no problem. So to check all this, it's intact. So once this is done, right, I will proceed on to install the case fan and the aRGB controller. The last two parts of the process in a PC build itself is to mount the fan and the aRGB controller itself. On my previous video, some of you who actually witnessed that I've done the cable management properly before I migrate all the components from my lenghty 2 case to the O11D Mini. For those of you who are actually interested to know how I do that, you can actually view the video. I'll leave the URL at the top right hand corner. Before I do so, right, I will normally do the location first, as in to look at the manual itself. Now, this is actually how it's being placed. It's already in the case. So this is actually the bottom part, this is the front, and this is the top. So for the top two fans itself, right, I will be plugging into the CPU 1 connector, which is located quite near to the right of the motherboard itself. So I know where the location to crimp, or should I say to manage the cables. Then for the rear itself, right, I'll be plugging into this chassis fan 1, which is near to the left. And as you know, the cables are pretty long, so I'll need to actually tidy them up. Okay, I'm just going to tidy up the cables right now. The tools I'll be using, in fact, are cable ties and a snipper. All done up nicely. As you can see here, no cable mess, is like, straight to the point. And on the controller itself, right, I've actually done a double-sided tape over here so that I will be taping this to the casing. I will first place the controller itself, so this will be facing down, so having it to have a very stealth look. Knowing the orientation itself, this is actually to the SATA, to the PSU itself, and this is actually the aRGB cable which I'm going to connect to the fans and to the front fans, aRGB, the top and the back. I'll just remove this and to paste it on the motherboard itself. And if you can have a look over here, right, there are two slots over here, I mean the holes, so I will place it in between them, and then to fill this in, or should I say the aRGB cable on this slot and the SATA on the other slot. As you can see over here, the aRGB controller is placed onto the board itself, and it's stealthed in a way that it doesn't show the logo itself. Now next will be the fans itself. I will mount the top fans. As you can see, there are cables over here, right? So one is actually for the aRGB, one is actually for the fan. So I will connect the fan first. You don't have to arrange the cable right now because you can tuck in later, but definitely you will need to actually plug in the connectors. So once this is in, right, insert the aRGB cable to the center slot, or should I say center hole. Then you can actually plug all the aRGB connection through the back. Then I will fasten this two fans here. Fans are all tightened up on the top and the back, or should I say the rear. And as you can see, the cabling are all nicely done. Same goes to the rear, if you can see over here, and at the top. So when I flip over, right, now I've actually connected everything. I'm not going to go through the cable ties with you guys, so basically these are all the cable ties that I've actually done. So it's actually neatly done, as you can see. So this is actually how it looks like. Everything is done up nicely. Oh my goodness, this is the longest video content I've actually done. In fact, spending my time to do all the details and to show you the experience that I have and to share with you the knowledge. Now, having to say this, right, the system is up and running. Let me just test the remote control. As you can see, if I were to press, it will respond to what I wanted it. See? And of course, okay, let me just station a color here. And of course, Windows 11 is actually running, whereby you can actually install your applications. And if you have not done the XMP profile on your RAMs itself, right, please do so, which I'm going to do it later. If you have the intention to overclock your newly built PC itself, right, or undervolting, I will stop you from there. Do not proceed. Let the system run by default for 1 or 2 weeks before you do any tweaks. Reason being, right, humans might be different from PC, but the practice is the same. As in, like, let's say we migrate from a hot country to a cold country, it takes time to get used to. So same goes to your motherboard and the rest of the component, especially your motherboard itself. There are so many circuitry on the PCB itself, so let it run in for a couple of weeks. Once settled down, right, then you do your overclocking. Things like your pump block and your radiator, it also takes time to actually recite to get a smooth flow. Now, for some thermal paste on the block to the processor itself, right, they have mentioned that you don't need time to cure. I will still let it sit, because when the thermal paste is actually in contact with the block and your processor itself, right, it takes time. As in, like, when it runs hot, right, it will just, you know, form a bond there. So let it sit. Once that's done, right, then after 1 or 2 weeks later, do the tweaks. That will be a safer bet. I know this video is very lengthy, and I thank you for watching till the end right here. There's a very good reason why I'm doing this. Reason being, right, I've actually observed from YouTubers and from PC builders or maybe reviewers, they have actually do a showcase as in illustrating to the viewers that the case is actually upright. Then they mount their video card, and to mount the block with the case standing upright. Reason being why I say it's actually not a positive illustration, because first, for your graphic card, right, if it happens that you slip your graphic card and it fall off to your table, and maybe accidentally you will just drop off from the table, you will just damage your graphic card. So if you have the case lay flat, right, when you drop, at least it's within the case itself, so you will not damage your graphic card, and it's actually on ground level when you're actually inserting your graphic card. Next will be your heatsink or the water block itself. With uneven pressure applied, especially when standing upright, right, your contact between the block and the CPU itself will not be good. So having it to actually lay your case flat and to place your block right, it's a better I should say it's a better mount because it's evenly pressured down. So hope you guys can actually understand this. Alright, now I'm not perfect. If you guys feel that in this video itself, right, I've actually done something wrong, you can actually leave a comment at my comment section and I'll take note on it and to improve on that. For those of you who are actually new in my channel, welcome to my channel, and if you do like my content, do remember to subscribe and to click on the notification bell button. Till then, I wish you all the best in your PC build. Take care, goodbye, see you.